can be seen now. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. I wanted to just do a few conversations with people over the next, I don't know, week or two, and just talk about kind of what's going on and what people are doing and how people are feeling. And so obviously, as Victoria probably knows and Val well knows, I talk to Jonathan all the time and about different things and whatever. And so I thought it'd be cool. Plus, we always, you are two of those people that we always say, oh yeah, we're going to get together. And then we never do. and then the virus is sort of like all those people, and I'm sure you have tons of people too, and we do as well. All those people we said we were going to get together with, you know, now we can't. And you'd pretty much give anything to get together with people.
Then we kind of can because we're home and there's nowhere else to go.
Exactly. Right. So our thought was to just talk to people, see what you guys are doing, what you're up to. Also, I think as Jonathan knows, him and I have some similar issues that we're dealing with now. And then, before we do that though, because we're going to, as Jonathan knows, Victoria, I don't even know this, we're going to share this with like our church people and people around. And so why don't you take a minute to kind of introduce yourselves and tell us who you are and all that stuff, because to most people that we know, you're new.
Cool. You want to go first, babe? No?
Not first. You're better at this.
Do I kind of introduce us as a couple or yeah?
And then yourselves.
So
well, yeah. So I'm Jonathan. This is Victoria, my wife. We've been married for just over 3 years now. We've been together for about 6.5 years. She's from Florida. I'm born and raised in Montreal. I'm a local homie. We're both like, serving the Lord. We really believe that, we're called to serve in the local church, engage God's mission in different ways. So we collaborate with a lot of different ministry networks. But yeah, like personally speaking, I came to the Lord in my late 20s, was baptized in my late 20s, and just felt a strong call to, follow the Lord, follow Jesus. And here I am, maybe 6-7 years later, 8 years later. Wouldn't have done it any other way. The Lord's been faithful in the process. And I've also in that journey met you, Richard, and in that through, I believe it was Tammy Thibodeau. So that was like the random connection because you guys were doing something at Riverdale, and then she mentioned you guys, and then somehow we met up for coffee, or we went to Moe's for poutine or something, and that was it. And
Some
then
of the best friendships are formed.
Yeah, it was a random connection that evolved into, a really good friendship as well. And then we also worked together for a couple of years. So that was pretty amazing. I love to consider myself bivocational. I work full time like you do, Richard. And I've been in the action sports industry my entire life. I grew up in the skateboard, snowboard industry, in my early teens all the way into my 20s. And now I've sort of returned there. I'm working for Vans Canada in sales. And it's just kind of getting back into the industry of my youth and exercising my gifts in that way, but also being God's living local presence in the workplace. And yeah, what else can we say? Also, more importantly, and most importantly, met Victoria on my journey. We met in New Hampshire at Soulfest New Sounds Music Festival. I was out there helping some friends who were part of the festival. We were kind of helping them run their merch table and just spend time with them in camp. And Victoria was out there with YWAM. YWAM is a fairly well-known global missions organization, and she was out there running her booth. So we sort of crossed paths in the, I guess we were both running booths. So everybody kind of like met each other through that. And then through the years, we grew in a long distance relationship. There's a lot of, detours and details that we could talk about maybe in another conversation. But we felt the Lord's hand on our relationship. And so here we are living in St. Anne de Bellevue, Quebec. We really believe God is doing something special in our neighborhood within proximity of our home. So, we're just excited for what the Lord is doing among us. Right, babe? That sound good?
Victoria, tell us about yourself. We know that we've sort of hinted, you're from another country.
Yes.
You've had a journey as well. So will you tell us a bit about yourself?
All the way from Florida. And like you said, I was a part of YWAM during the time that I met him. I knew before I met him that my time with YWAM was coming to a close, not for any bad reason, just knew it was time for a change of season. And it was on my heart that I would be moving, but I wasn't sure where. I would pray that I'd get to move somewhere that was an island, and I didn't know I needed to specify a place with palm trees because this is not what I had in mind.
Hey, you answered your prayer. You can't complain.
I know. So, I met him, and one thing after another unfolded, and now I'm living here on the island of Montreal with my husband, and I'm still working on immigrating, so there's not a lot about what I'm doing right now, but I like to join him in these different missional projects that come up, and every now and then I pursue things myself that are on my heart, but usually he's pretty good at seeking things out and making them happen. So
good. So, I mean, first of all, thank you for that. So given these times now, we've all been, whether we're working or not, now, John, you're working from home, but we've been under lockdown now for almost a month, right? Everybody, one way or another, limited. Talk about how that journey's kind of been for you, I think from two different perspectives. One, you're normally very active in church, so how does that, shake out? And then two, like between yourselves, how's that been?
Well, let's start between ourselves. No? Wouldn't that be a good place to start?
turns out we actually do really like each other, so that's good.
We love each other.
We love each other, but we haven't really had any moments of, like, for the most part, we just enjoy getting to hang out.
Yeah, so we opened our back porch, so we've been barbecuing. We've kind of been doing some interior design projects. Victoria is very passionate about getting those projects started and finishing them. So we had a lot of time. We've had extra time to finish those projects. So most of them have been just like paint jobs and accent decor, and because we have a couple rooms upstairs, and just recently we rent out one of our rooms. One of our roommates, she left, so we kind of had an extra room to get organized. So we've had this time to kind of get that in place, and we've been both reading a lot. Victoria has been writing a devotion a day, starting like on day one of 2020. She started like writing a devotion every day. So she's been writing a devotion every day. So spending time in the morning with the Lord, obviously, and just sending out these devotionals to specific people who God placed on her heart. And then, for me, I have my morning, rhythm of just getting up, having a coffee, making breakfast, opening the Word, praying, and just going about my day after that. So it's been pretty routine, I guess. It's been pretty routine. We've been in and out every now and then. Unfortunately, we were out on April 2nd at the Costco in Vaudreuil. So now we are on self-quarantine until April 16th. So we're gonna be in today. My brother and his wife, who live in El Perot, they dropped off some extra things that we needed. And so
Not
sweet.
needed, just some extra things that we were dying without, like potato chips.
Yeah, my snacks.
Yeah.
I need snacks.
Really important stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been interesting. Like no hockey, no nothing. So you really like, you got no fantasy league to oversee. You got no Méchant Mardi Mosenex, or you don't have no hockey.
Yeah. Victoria's like, oh darn.
No distractions. Yeah. So then.
Well, no distractions, but it's amazing how you can still find a way to distract yourself from the things that matter, even when there's like nothing to do.
Yeah.
Hardly anything to do.
Yeah, I've been working from home too, so it's been relatively busy, but obviously less busy. But it's been more busy for church because I'm in communications with our church, and that has ramped up 110% in this time, just coordinating online environments or virtual environments, whatever you want to call it, and just making sure that the website is in place and secure and not, didn't go down overnight because it didn't get hacked, or, different things like that, making sure email communications are going out or social media is up to date, and just, managing all our different platforms and coordinating our live streams and all that stuff has been busy, but it's been interesting to see how people have been, coming together through this. I think in these circumstances, it's almost as if God used the circumstances to bring community to people where they're at. In our church, we have a lot of young families, so it's hard for young families to move themselves from their homes on a weekday during the evening to, for a prayer meeting or something. So now it's been interesting to just see how prayer meetings are full. Like they're always full, and they're always multi-generational. Their kids are in the Zoom meeting, interacting, and it's pretty interesting because before we would host prayer meetings and you would get a smaller core group of people together, and now it's more of a little bit of a wider core group of people that would be in a virtual prayer setting. So that's been a blessing. It's been cool to kind of just see that happen. And just obviously the online engagement is amped up because people are, glued to their news feeds, and they're always kind of, anxiously maybe looking for the news. And then, so like, you can tell that, insights online have gone up, 75%, because people are there, that's where they are. Whether they like it or not, that's where they are, Yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think that's it. If there's anything else, I don't know if there's anything else specifically.
What about like in terms of Victoria? I know today I saw you having to write a poem, and I know Val wrote a new song recently as well. So are you finding like even though you normally are creative, you're finding more chance for that, or is it just a different way or a different time now because of what's happening?
I would say that my life has not changed a lot in this time because of immigration and not having a job. I spent a lot of time in this apartment, and I'm still getting used to the idea of public transportation because that's like not something that I ever did in Florida. So I don't spend much time going out, though I definitely spend more time than this. Like, it's still nice to have the option of, if I need to change of scenery at the end of the day, to be able to hop in the car and go somewhere with him. So not to say my life hasn't changed at all, but I feel like a lot of the things that maybe people are having to learn right now are things that I've been processing for the last 3 years, of how to be still and not go crazy. And that I have a huge heart for mental health, and I know that isolation can play a toll on someone's mental health, whether that's something that they tend to struggle with or not. And so I've just been trying to implement the things that I've always known to do, to like create a routine in my day and to have goals and to be honest with myself with how I'm feeling. You know, there are some days that creep up and it just, you don't feel good inside. You can't quite pinpoint why. You know, sometimes you can, but a lot of times, like, there's not so much a reason other than like you've been in the same house for like days on end. And to like let yourself feel that way instead of trying to numb it with Netflix or a book or whatever you're gonna do. I've learned a lot about just like, you know, God created us a certain way, and you have to let yourself be who He created you to be. Like, let yourself go through hard things the way that you were created to, and the good things. So just kind of taking it day by day and trying to not like dwell too much in the future of like how long this is gonna last. We're hopefully gonna go to Florida in July, and I try not to have the thought that that might not happen because that feels really sad. But yeah, I've definitely been being artistic. I don't know if I've been more artistic, but I would say, been more artistic in community. Like, there's been people that have wanted to do little like projects over Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. So that's been neat to like to do things like that. Yeah, I would say, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
I had a question as well, actually, when you were talking about it. Does it help for you, like you've been processing those feelings that, you know, sometimes you're on your own a lot in the apartment and all that. Does it help you to know that other people now are out there feeling the same thing or expressing those types of frustrations? Or do you find it easily making you kind of almost resentful to say, well, I've been feeling this way longer, or does it help you to know that there's a larger amount of people out there kind of feeling what you've been feeling? Or I don't know, does it help or make it worse, or has it not really, you haven't thought that at all? I was just curious.
I don't know that it helps or necessarily makes it worse. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Well, in one way I wouldn't, and in other ways, like, not the actual virus, but the having to be still. I mean, I know it's a different story this time if you're a mom with young kids, but for the most part, like, everyone's life has come to a still, and it seems like to me that we're in a society that worships busyness and idolizes busyness, and that was like an idol that needed to be dethroned in my own life, that's for sure, in a place of value that wasn't healthy. And more like what I feel is I'm especially sorry for people that like don't have anyone that they live with in this time and like are having to spend these days on end alone. Like, I can't imagine how hard that would be, but I'm also grateful for this opportunity for most people to get to reevaluate where they are and maybe see things in their life that they've persuaded themselves isn't healthy, because it can be so easy to downplay our idols and to really not make much of them. And but idols are just like, there's a reason why we're not meant to have them, and like they bring destruction to our life. And so in this time, people are having to face the things that have been wanting to bring destruction to their life. And so I really, like, as much as this is hard, I hope that this is a time that the church discovers a new health that isn't rooted in busyness and things, but just rooted in knowing who they are in stillness before the Lord, and knowing how valuable that is, and that those that aren't Christians would see that in those that are, and wonder, like, why do you seem so fulfilled in this time and so at peace, and that it would stir things or allow conversations that otherwise wouldn't be happening. So that's more where my headspace has been towards this time for other people.
Great. No, that's great. That's great. You got to preach that. That's a good word.
Yeah, it is.
I think it just summed up like all of the quarantine in a couple of minutes. So that's great. Because I was gonna kind of like lead me to sort of pick up on what Bob was saying. It's like if you could say, let's call it top 2 or 3 things that you hope believers would take away from this. I mean, I think there's a truth to the fact that life will never be the same now, because like the way we interact, like for example, they're saying that the handshake will die, right? Because we can't do that anymore. But I wonder,
Which is fine with me because I'm a hugger, but
well,
that's even worse.
the hug is gonna die too, you know. So that bisou and all that stuff. But what I mean is, yes, it's gonna change. But let's be honest. If in 8 months, all the sport leagues have started up again and all the schools have started up again, it's gonna go a lot to like it was before, right? Like, and people's lives will fill up with. They're not bad things, right? The busyness, not all of them are bad. They're things that we all do. What are you hoping are the 2 or 3 things, and you guys can make a list each or together, that believers take away from this that we apply when things are back to normal, as in quotation?
That's a crazy question. It's a big, I mean, obviously there could be so many answers to that question, but
What do you hope for?
I really hope that the church would recognize its call to contrast the culture around them. I think the church needs to rise up and differentiate themselves from the world, or ourselves from the world around us. I think right now it's hard to differentiate the church from the world. I think outside of, if you're in the church and you understand what fuels the church, the foundation of it, and obviously Christ being the head of the church, you understand that there's something different, obviously, that differentiates it by definition. But I think my hope is that the church would rise up and provide a contrast to the culture around it. And also, like, I think it kind of goes together, is the church's call to devotion. The church's call to worship the Lord. I think we often skip the first commandment of love God with all your being and move to how are we going to love our neighbor, right? And we manage to conjure up all kinds of nifty strategic plans about how we can love our neighbor and reach out to them and bless them and do all these amazing things for them, but I find that if we were honest with ourselves, most of our energy goes into that, and less of our energy goes into actually loving God with all of our being, heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's a pretty it requires the Spirit's power for us to do that, right? So the measure, the depth of God's love and power in the church embodying that first commandment to love God is what I hope for. Like through this, that the church realize that God is calling them to, offer itself up as a living sacrifice, that one body that Paul talks about in Romans, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. But I mean, it starts off in this, offer your bodies up as living sacrifices, right? I believe that is where the church is being called to, the core of the heart of worship and devotion and loving God with all of our being, because this may be just a drop in the bucket. This is a minor test to what is coming for the church and for the world at large. We must anticipate this to be a norm, that this virus isn't just, and that's not to incite fear or anxiety or anything. Actually, it should be the opposite for the church, because we know what's at play here, So I think that's the call to loving God. being what fuels everything else that we're doing. And out of that place, we'll be able to discern what God's perfect and pleasing will is, right? Because we're always kind of just like, well, God's will is for us to reach out and love our neighbors. No, like God's will is for us to offer our bodies up as living sacrifices, to love him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Everything else to kind of just, you know, Jesus is going to come home from his radiant bride. That's our hope. Our hope is for Jesus to come back and get, like, to come home, like, you know, like Maranatha, Jesus come, you know, like that's the whole heart, you know. And I think that one question that came to me a couple weeks ago was, does the church even find itself desiring for Jesus to come back? Like, is it a question that we ask ourselves? Like, or is it a question that we avoid because, you know, we pray, Father, like, let your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do we even know what that means fully consumed, consummated? Do we actually want that picture where Jesus, you know, hands the keys over to, you know, God the Father, like we see in 1 Corinthians 15, you know, like that's a beautiful picture, but do we actually find ourselves wanting that, especially in a time of crisis? Are we asking ourselves that question, you know, or are we like too busy trying to kind of, you know, sort of adapt to our surroundings and find new strategic approaches to reach out to people over the internet and like all these things, which essentially are tools that have been given to us that naturally we respond to because we're creative and we're made in the image and likeness of God, and we're resourceful and we're gifted, so we could do all these things no matter what. But are we actually loving God in that, you know? So that was my hope, is that, you know, we'll love God, like we'll love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I would be a witness to an expression of that, you know?
What was the question?
What do you hope for through this?
2 or 3 key things you wish people would take away, you know, through this. Like when things return to normal, one day, it'll be easy for us to kind of move on and go, oh gosh, remember 2020? That was crazy, right? But what are you hoping sticks with us so that we don't, the lessons we say we've learned, we don't go back and forget?
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind, which is kind of along with what I've been saying, but way before this began, I feel like I heard like a consistent desire for still waters and quiet streams. But I know if we're children of God, that's something that's always available to us. It's never his fault that we're not sitting by still waters or quiet streams. And I almost like have this picture in my head of it being right there with like your chair, or just even sitting in the grass, like right there available to you, and someone like running in place like, I'm so tired, and the Lord's like, but you're here, like you're here in my still waters and quiet streams, like nothing is stopping you. And so I hope that like there's practices learned in this time that allows, like, as people return to work and have healthy obligations in their life, that they still know that those still waters and quiet streams are there. I mean, it's part of the 10 commandments that at least one day is a holy day and a sacred day of rest. And like, I don't take it seriously. I can't tell you how many weeks every day, including Sunday, goes by and like it's been filled with work or like things that don't provide rest. And it's so important to the Lord that even if he needed to take a day of rest, that it's something that is on his heart. So just that each individual discover what their quiet streams are, and that would be something that they make time for, because that's where the Lord is. Like, he's present in our rest, and that's where like we demonstrate our trust in him, that we can at least give him one day of our life and trust that the world will go on just fine in his hands. So that's one thing I hope. And this is something, the other thing is something more that I'm surprised he didn't say, because it's kind of more his thing that he brings up. But I mean, not just this, but there's a lot of things in the last couple of years that have come up that are pretty like intense things that like the church needs to have an answer for. And I find often when different categories come up, the church doesn't have like a thought through answer. It's either like really fearful or we don't want to offend anyone. Like, it's not one that feels often like straight from the heart of God. And in this time, like, I know like the church is looking for answers in its own way. And I hope one way that we grow is that as like this world's going to fall apart and become more worldly in different ways, that like the church would be ready to have an answer for what they believe, and one that is filled with love, but also truth. And that people would find like in this time, like actually really discover what they believe and what their answers are for the things happening in the world, and that they wouldn't just let this pass by, but actually press in and ask the Lord, like, what's going on? Where are you in this? And like, what is the answer that I give to a lost and dying world in this time? And like a confident answer that I can give them, not one that's cowardly or I don't know, like you just do you and I'll do me, and and let's not like hurt each other in this. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it really does. I mean, I don't want to say anything. So it's I mean, even now, even there's like there's some issues that have come up recently, and we skate around things, right? Because we want to, like you were talking about before, Jonathan. We want people to come. We want people to come to our churches, and we sometimes we skate around issues and whatever. And it's funny. I don't know. I think I might have said this to Jonathan before, but I've definitely said it to Val, that a lot of the issues that were controversial and being talked about every day in social media in the world before the coronavirus, nobody's talking about them right now. They like died on the vine. Nobody cares about them. Nobody's talking about them. And it's like they'll come back, but it's when it gets truly life and death, people kind of change their tune. And it's funny you're talking about still waters. I don't know if you guys saw, Val and I went for a walk the other day, and I took a picture of the water by our house. We live not too far from like you guys, not too far. If you saw, I took a picture and I just captioned it "Still Waters." Did you see that one on Instagram or whatever? Because it's crazy how, because there's no boats, there's no activity on the lake. And so we're actually seeing the lake in its natural state. It's quiet. And the only reason it was always choppy was because we humans were running around and doing stuff. And actually its natural state. So in the same way, the believer's life's natural state, if it were, is this quiet state that God provides for us. And to link it back to what Jonathan was saying, I don't know if you guys feel this way, the still waters, that comes from Psalm 23, right? And you lead me in green pastures, you lead me beside still waters. But then it goes on to talk about how God prepares a table for us in the middle of the presence of our enemies. And what's amazing about that for me to talk about, what I'm hearing in this time is, John, you mentioned it, it's not that bad right now. It's not like Christians are being persecuted in the West. I mean, nobody can meet, right? Mom and pop groups can't meet, and choirs can't meet, and sports teams can't meet, and every religion can't meet. It's not like we've been singled out, right? And so, but if we were to go talk to our brothers and sisters in China, not only are they dying of COVID-19, their churches are literally being demolished by bulldozers. They're being rounded up. They're being put in jail. They're being put in concentration camps. It's happening now, like right now, as we're talking. So like we have it pretty easy, right? I have to stay home with my Netflix and my plenty of food and all that stuff. They can't even do this. They can't even have Zoom church. They're being shut down all over the place in China. But God, they understand, I think, this second half of the verse more than us, that God prepares it. And what I love, the imagery of it, is God preparing a table in the presence of my enemies. It says, you anoint me, my head with oil, my cup overflows. Your goodness and love will overflow all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I love this image of like all of us sitting at a table, sitting down to have a meal. And as we all know biblically, sitting down and having a meal is that whole idea of fellowship, right? And that's when we really connect. And that's why it's always great to get together with people like you, because that's what you want to do. You want to sit down and connect. And what, like, our enemies are there, they're all raging and fighting, and we're like, hang on a second, I've got to sit down and have a meal because
Quiet ourselves.
yeah, and quiet myself because and there's nothing they can do about it. Like they have to wait till we finished our meal.
Yeah.
And I kind of always link that up with what we're celebrating tomorrow, Resurrection Sunday, right? My favorite part of all of Resurrection Sunday, my favorite truth of everything is that when you read it, and the different accounts, is that when they went into the tomb to find the grave clothes, that the one that was wrapped around his head was folded.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus took it off, and then he literally took the time to fold it nicely and put it back. Get it? Like he's not in a rush.
Right.
We're in a rush. But he didn't rip it off and go, I'm going to get out there. He's like, you know what? I'm going to help them out. And he's folded. Like that image to me just shows the God who's like still waters, no worries.
At peace.
He was just literally in Hades. Yeah, he was literally just in Sheol. Like, and he took the time to fold the laundry. Like
that would be what this day represent. What he's doing right now, you know, everybody thinks he's dead. He's still, you know, like
exactly, like it's Saturday, right? It's like what they call Holy Saturday, right? It's the quiet Saturday, but like he's right now, he's in hell going to the devil. I'll have those keys, thanks.
Yeah.
And the devil's like, what? And all of his followers are going, oh no, you know, all of his followers today, if they had Facebook, would be on Facebook going, it's all over. It's a conspiracy, you know, and they'd be, right? That's what they'd be that person, you know? So it's really encouraging to hear what you guys are hearing and seeing. And, you know, Val and I get a chance to talk to different people kind of in different places. It seems like a lot of people are on the same, I don't know what the word is, wavelength. Or whatever, regardless of.
Well, that's the way the Spirit is also working with people who are exercised as well. I think anybody who's attuned to the voice of the Lord, this is the way the Lord is shaping His church in this time, you know, and He'll always work in very similar ways, especially in times like this. You know, He'll be speaking. I remember someone. I think it was my dad. My dad had shared with me because he's been. On Sunday mornings, kind of hopping from stream to stream, you know, like from different church stream to different church stream. And he started with his fellowship, and his fellowship is just they just break bread together over Zoom, you know, like 40 believers breaking bread over Zoom. And then he switches to another message, listens to the message, switches it, and all of the messages have common threads.
Yeah.
You know? And I think it had to do with like, restoring the heart of worship. It's just sort of like along the lines of what I've been praying into as like, you know, as anything happens, any prayer meeting that's held, any, you know, live stream that's hosted, any sermon that's prepped for, like, there's always this call to worship. Like, hey, are we like, you know, is that invitation embedded in today's word? Like, is the call to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Is that embedded in the substance of this message? You know, so that's like of utmost importance in this time, is that when people are drawing close to the Lord and being intimate with Him, it's in a posture of worship, of adoration, right? And that's like the best place the church can be in a season, in any season like this, especially one where we're called to endure through like little inconveniences like this, you know. I don't want to say they're like large inconveniences, because we're still grocery shopping and we're still going for walks, we're still going for jogs, you know, like whenever we can, you know, unless you're in self-quarantine, then it's okay.
Unless you're at the Costco.
I heard it said once that once heaven comes, you know, obviously we know there'll be no more tears or suffering, and no longer will we have the opportunity to tell Christ that He's worthy in the midst of pain. And right now is like, we're focused on, you know, the 3 days, like His death, the Holy Saturday, and then Easter Sunday. And like, that's the depths that He went to for us. And even yesterday on the Friday that the curtain was torn in two, like that in a way is the heart of it, that access, like finally being blameless before Him. And it's not a small thing, but it can become so familiar that it becomes kind of small to us and unimportant to us. But it's a really big deal that curtain is torn in two, and like as much as there's nothing going on, like I kind of said in the beginning, it's still easy to distract yourself, but it's like this beautiful time to actually sit before the feet of Jesus. Like there's never an hour too long spent before his feet. And it's like one thing that I prayed a lot when I first moved here and spent that time alone was, God, I am bored out of my mind, but if scripture is true, then you're the most exciting thing ever. And I have full access to that. And like, I want to discover that excitement alone here in this apartment. And so I hope for me and for everyone that like we rediscover that excitement and that we no longer take the torn curtain lightly, but that we carry that with us and that we enter in as often as we can. And I wonder if those spiritual gifts that we gain up for ourselves in heaven, the treasures that we store for ourselves in heaven, if what we're going to want to do is when we finally see him face to face, take everything we've ever earned and hope we have as much as possible so that we can just throw it at his feet. And so, our computer battery is getting
That's
low.
huge.
His computer battery is getting low.
Well, good. Well, I think we had a great conversation. This was awesome. Now I feel like this can't be the last one. That was too good. Thank you so much for doing this.
And your honesty.
Yeah, great words. This is going to be super encouraging. And, you know, you've had a chance to visit a couple of our meetings before, whatever. So you guys talk very much in the same stream that we run into. And I think that people are going to this is really going to resonate with the folks who hear this. And, you know, thank you so much for taking the time. You know, we miss you guys. We love you guys. And we'll be in touch soon. Who knows?
In person when this is over.
Also, happy birthday to your cat. We heard your cat.
Benny Jr.
Yeah, so happy birthday to Kat. And we'll see you guys soon. God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you too.
Bye.
Bye.